Hello, everybody, and welcome to my presentation today. I'm excited for this presentation. We're going to be talking about a topic that I think is very, very interesting, and I hope you find it interesting as well. We're going to be talking about gender pay gap in sports. And to give you a little bit of context, basically, gender wage gap is an ongoing issue that we've seen in the sports field for a long time. Basically, it's the unequal pay between women and their counterpart men. When did this start? Originally, this started back in 1968. At least it was first publicly noticed back then and addressed. It started with a tennis player named Billie Jean King. She ended up winning a match and she took home a pay of $1,300. Come to find out that her male counterpart that won his match took home $3,600. So as you can see, there is quite a bit of a discrepancy between the two. So the question arises: is this fair? Is this fair that she took home less pay? Looks like some of you think this is unfair out there. I can see some of you out here raising your hands. Um, the answer is yes and no. At least I think so. I think yes and no. Superficially, if we look at it, this demand of unfair pay, it looks like a fair statement, and looks like a lot of you out there did agree that women need to be paid more. However, according to ESPN, they came out with a statement and they said that women can perform the same or just as well as a man. So let's look actually further into their statement and find out if this is actually true. So ESPN, they compared two different players. They chose the NBA player and the WNBA player. They chose Anthony Davis in his 2018-2019 season. They compared her to, I think you say, Nike Owijamike in the 2018-2019 season. They compared a statistic. This statistic is called the win share stat. Basically, it shows you how much impact you have on your team. They found that Anthony Davis during the season, he had a .247, whereas Nika had .248. So statistically, she did a lot better than him, right? However, she's making far less than Anthony Davis. So many people get on the bus and get behind that women athletes should earn more because obviously their statistics are the same or even better. And I guess that's a good point to bring up. However, I don't believe it's the full picture. Just real quickly, we're going to cover just kind of all sports. If we look here on this chart, we can see the actual discrepancies and the wage gaps. Basketball, you can see there's an $8 million salary compared to women, 75,000 is all. We go through golf, 1 million to 48, soccer, 410,000 to 35,000, softball, 4 million to 6 million in women's, and tennis, 335,000 to 283. So we can see that there's quite a discrepancy between men and women's sports. Now, I'd like to take this example a little further. We're going to talk a little bit more about the NBA and the WNBA. Most noticeably, we can see the difference between the NBA and the WNBA. This is really interesting, I think. So Stephen Curry, he's probably one of the most well-known basketball players in the world, one of the best. He is a four-time NBA champion. He's won titles in 2015, 17, 18, and 2022. His salary is about $48 million, maybe even more now, possibly. Whereas his counterpart, Enrique Ojimbola, has a salary of about $234,000. So we can see that there's quite a discrepancy between the two. And this is per season. Keep that in mind. Per season, this is the total amount. So Curry makes the 48 million. Enrique only makes the 234,000. And she's the highest paid in her league in the WNBA. So if we look at it and break it down, Steph Curry, this statistic is kind of sad. Steph Curry makes more in 2 quarters of one game than the highest WNBA player, which is a mind-boggling statistic to think about, that the men are paid so much more than the women. However, this brings us to the hard truth. Sports are entertaining, but they are a business. While we love watching them, deep down, if we go and at the end of the day, we see that sports are a business. This, I feel, is very, very important at this point. If the league has high revenue, then they can afford to pay more money to their players and their teams. If the WNBA, for example, had more revenue, they could afford to pay their players more money and their teams. So let's talk a little bit about this reality and the point I'm trying to prove here. Why is there a large gap? Number one, the endorsement deals. Female athletes do not get as many endorsements from people like Nike, Adidas, all those big brands out there. They don't attract as many. And that's part of one of the reasons why there's such a large gap. Number two is the media. The media just doesn't cover the female athletes as much. The media doesn't view it as exciting or as attention grabbing as the male athletes. So thus viewership is lower, the athletes are paid less. And the third reason is economic return. The female teams, and we can often see this, I see this a lot in the NBA, WNBA, is the female teams, they attract fewer fans. That's just the bottom line. There's less revenue coming in, less money, and so they can't pay their players as much. So while we can lay these terms down easy enough, is it really possible to create fair pay for female athletes? And no, it's not. Not yet. There still needs to be a lot that needs to be done before there is equal pay between male and female athletes. But I just wanted to cover some points real quick. Well, if this were to change, how can we resolve it? Some of the resolutions or ideas that come to mind are Congress needs to get involved. They would have to pass laws to have women paid as much as men. Also implementing transparency laws that allow the female athletes to see how much their teammates and even their counterparts, the male athletes, are being paid per season, and they'll break down. And also, they need to increase sponsorships. Sponsorships and endorsements would help tremendously in getting female athletes paid more. In summary, and to wrap this presentation up, female sports don't generate the interest or revenue to support pay structure anywhere close to what a men's game can offer. That is the bottom line. The bottom line is there's just not enough revenue. And I believe there's a big misconception. People rely more on the stats, that women are just as good, and no one's arguing that. Women are just as amazing as men. But the bottom line is they just don't generate enough revenue to be able to pay their athletes as much. Thank you for coming to my presentation today. I hope you learned something, about the gender wage gap in sports. Thank you.